Hello, and welcome back, everyone. When most people think about marine construction, they usually focus on the crane, the pile driving, the heavy equipment, but one of the most important pieces of the entire operation usually gets overlooked, and that's the barge. And if you really understand marine construction, you understand that barges are not just floating platforms. They are the job site. Everything depends on them. Equipment, materials, crew movement, production, stability, safety, and logistics. Without the right barge setup, even the best equipment in the world can become inefficient or completely unusable. And this is another part of the industry where experience matters a lot more than people realize, because barges may look simple sitting on the water, but they affect almost every part of the project. In the last episode, I talked about how marine construction equipment works as a system, how every piece affects the next piece. And barges are one of the biggest examples of that. Because in marine construction, nothing happens without a platform to work from when you're operating on the water. Now, people outside the industry may think a barge is basically just a floating piece of steel. But in reality, different barges are designed for completely different purposes. There are many types of barges. There's steel barges, aluminum barges, wood barges, fiberglass barges, and even HDPE barges. Who would have ever thought that? And growing up, I even remember my grandfather owning a concrete barge. The entire barge was made of concrete. I was very young at the time, but I remember thinking, how in the world is concrete floating? That's another episode itself when we start talking about displacement and buoyancy. Anyway, but having designed and built many barges for specific needs in my career in the industry, I've seen so many types of barges. Some barges are designed for carrying equipment. Some are designed for transporting materials. Some are built specifically for stability. Some are designed for shallow water. Some are built for transporting fuel. Others are designed for extremely heavy loads. You have jack-up barges, dry dock barges, and specialized barges designed for completely different operations. And choosing the wrong barge for the job can create problems immediately. As mentioned in the last episode, you have to figure out what type of marine construction work you want to pursue to pick the best barge for that, or the correct barge for that. Here's another one people don't see. They see a crane operating on a barge, but they don't think about how weight is distributed, how the barge handles movement, how tides affect positioning, how wind affects stability, how current affects alignment. All those things matter. And on the water, small changes can create big problems fast. Unlike land construction, your foundation is moving. That's one of the biggest differences. Even on relatively calm water, a floating platform is still reacting to conditions. Equipment swinging across the deck, boat wakes, wind, current, tide movement, and weather shifts. Everything affects the operation. That means positioning becomes critical, because if the platform moves, the work moves with it. I've seen situations where conditions looked manageable early in the morning. Everything was lined up. The crane was positioned correctly. The pile leads were aligned. Production was moving. The crew were in sync with each other. Then conditions slowly started changing. The wind picked up. The waves increased. The current started building. The barge started shifting more than expected. And now suddenly the crew is spending more time repositioning equipment than actually producing work. That affects production immediately. And when production slows down in marine construction, costs rise quickly. My point being is you must constantly be planning for unexpected changes while working off a barge in this industry. Often underestimated in this industry is how expensive barges really are, not just to buy, but to operate. You're dealing with transportation, fuel, insurance, mooring, mobilization, inspections, crew support, repairs, and maintenance. Your barge is one of your biggest assets in this industry. And if a barge isn't utilized efficiently, those costs continue whether work is happening or not. That's why planning matters so much, because once equipment and barges are mobilized, the financial pressure starts immediately. I want to talk about barge maintenance, but I want to share a story with you that directly relates to maintenance. It happened during a seawall and concrete project in Punta Gorda, Florida. We had purchased a specific size barge to fit through bridge spans inside the community. If I remember correctly, it was around 22 or 24 feet wide and about 90 feet long. It was an old ex-Navy bridge barge made up of multiple sections. One morning, I pulled up to the staging area across the canal from the project. The canal was lined with condominiums on both sides. I got out of my truck and I noticed the crane operator sitting eating lunch in the crane. I started looking around for the deckhands and the tug captain, and nobody was there. The crane operator told me that they had gone to grab some lunch. The moment I looked at the barge, I knew something wasn't right. It was loaded down heavy. I mean, really heavy. The bow only had around 8 inches of freeboard, if that, and the stern maybe around a foot at best. I also noticed the barge was listing towards the port side, which was facing the outer part of the canal. Right away, I asked the crane operator, did anybody check the compartments this morning? And he really didn't have an answer, but honestly, I already knew the answer. They hadn't checked them. I told him to start opening the hatches, and at the time, he was around 70 years old. He climbed down from the crane and started checking the compartments. Sure enough, they were all full of water. I immediately yelled from shore to get the pumps going. As I walked back toward my truck to call for additional pumps and try to get a hold of deckhands and the captain, the crane operator made a decision that almost turned deadly. He swung the crane to the opposite side of the barge to try to level it out. Huge mistake. The moment he did that, the listing side went underwater and the hatches had been left open. At the moment, I felt anger, fear at the same time. The barge immediately started listing harder, and at the time, we had an LS 98 link belt crane chained down to the deck. The barge was also loaded with dirt, concrete, seawall panels, dock sections, and piling. I could see the situation getting worse by the second. I started yelling to the crane operator, "Jump off the barge." At first, he froze. You could see the fear hit him. I kept yelling to him, "Jump, jump," but he still wasn't moving. The barge was sitting roughly 10 feet off the seawall behind some condos. There wasn't even a walk board in place because they had most likely swung themselves over using the clamshell bucket. At that point, I made a decision. I jumped onto the barge from shore and to get him off before the barge capsized. I was able to push both of us off in the water right as the barge rolled upside down in the water. He's in shock. Honestly, so was I. A few moments later, the deckhands and captain came back. They helped us get onto shore. Then came the calls I always dreaded making. But to shorten the story a little, we ended up bringing in a 300-ton crane to recover the link belt crane from the water and flip the barge back over. What followed was countless hours of work, day and night, divers working in black water, including myself, cutting chains and cable underwater and dismantling equipment, the spud winches, and installing what we call sandwich patches onto the sections of the barge so we could pump the water out. It became a massive recovery project. And the truth is, it could have been prevented. All I really needed to do was reskin several sections of that barge during maintenance. That would have taken far less time and definitely would have cost far less money. That experience taught me something I've said many times since then. If you don't make time for your equipment maintenance, the equipment will make time for you. And it almost always comes at a much higher cost. So remember that. A lot of people don't realize how much work goes into simply getting barges to a project. Sometimes they travel long distances. Sometimes routes must be planned around bridges, tides, or water depth. Sometimes they come in sections on trucks to a job site and then offloaded by crane or other means into the water and put together. Sometimes weather delays movement completely. And once they arrive, positioning everything correctly can become an operation all by itself, especially on larger projects. Now, one of the most important parts of marine construction while operating from a barge is positioning it. Because barges don't just magically stay where you put them. Positioning can involve anchoring systems, spuds, tugboats, lines and winches, and constant adjustments throughout the day as the project progresses, especially when conditions change. And this is where experienced crews become extremely valuable because efficient positioning saves time, and saved time saves money. Another thing rarely seen from the outside of the industry is the pressure that builds when operations start falling behind on the water. Because unlike many land projects, marine construction doesn't always give you the flexibility. Sometimes you're working within weather windows, sometimes tide windows, sometimes environmental restrictions, sometimes equipment availability, and when delays start stacking together, pressure builds quickly. You may have multiple barges on site, multiple crews, multiple pieces of equipment running, fuel burning every hour. Then conditions start changing, weather starts moving in, current changes, wind picks up. Now decisions must happen quickly. Do you continue working? Do you reposition? Do you shut the operation down temporarily? Because every decision affects production, cost, safety, and schedule. Now, marine construction involves a lot of waiting on the weather, waiting on tides, waiting on material deliveries, waiting on equipment, waiting on positioning adjustments. And while all of that waiting is happening, the costs don't stop. The barges are still there. The crew is still there. The equipment is still there. Insurance is still running. Fuel is still being burnt. Schedules are still moving. That creates pressure people outside the industry rarely see. Owners want answer. Schedules still matter. Costs continue to rise. And sometimes crews are sitting there waiting for conditions to improve while thousands of dollars continue to disappear every single day. Marine construction has a way of punishing shortcuts. And not just financially. It can damage your reputation. It can damage trust. Trust from owners. Trust from engineers. Trust from inspectors. Even trust from your own employees. That's why I tell people never cut corners. Ever. Water exposes weaknesses quickly, especially inexperienced. Experienced crews learn how to spot problems early, sometimes before they fully develop. And small problems on the water can become major problems very quickly if they aren't handled in time. Preparation matters far more than most people realize. Whether it's a small project or a large one, a small barge or a large one, preparation is critical. How materials are staged, what equipment is selected, how the crew is organized, weather tracking, tide awareness, preventative maintenance. All those things affect the success of the operation. And honestly, I'm not here to sound like a broken record. I'm here to share what 4 generations of experience has taught my family over time. Marine work requires coordination. Crane operators, equipment operators, boat operators, deckhands, pile driving crews, concrete crews, carpenters, welders, mechanics, dredge crews, rod busters, supervisors, divers, and many others. Everybody must work together safely around heavy equipment moving water. That requires communication, trust, experience, and awareness, especially during difficult conditions. Barges may not always be the most exciting part of marine construction to people outside the industry, but experienced contractors understand how important they really are. They are the foundation of the operation, the floating job site, and many times the success of the project depends on how efficiently that floating system is maintained, staffed, and operated. So, please leave a comment. I love hearing from you as all your comments mean a lot to me. I had a comment from a viewer that asked me if I would do an episode on how hurricanes affect marine construction. So I've decided to make a special episode on that topic next. So if you're enjoying the series, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. I'm Roy Benton. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.